Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. We're going to spend some time today looking at the Republican debate last night, which was the highest rated debate in months. Interestingly enough, some people have called it a jab fest or a slug fest or Thunderdome. I've seen all sorts of different names for it, and there's a good reason for it, because next Tuesday is Super Tuesday, and you are going to have either a primary or a caucus in Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, Colorado, Georgia, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, Virginia, and Wyoming. Very important. And then, of course, a few days later, those of you that are in states like Kansas and Kentucky and Louisiana and Maine will be voting March 5th. Again, some are caucuses, some are primaries. Don't know that we have any listeners in Puerto Rico, so I'll skip over that one. And then, of course, you have on March 8th, Hawaii, Idaho, Michigan, Mississippi. And then we get into, of course, another whole set on March 15th, which is Florida, Illinois, Missouri, North Carolina, and Ohio, which covers a lot of different states in which we broadcast. So today I'm going to play some of the clips from the debate last night, but most importantly, want to know your thoughts about either the debate. Perhaps you had a chance to see it last night. It wouldn't be surprising if you did. More people watched this than one in some time. As a matter of fact, this is one of those times when the major networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, are kicking themselves. They're just, going, I wish we had done this, because they had no idea that these debates would be so popular. Some of them outpolled and outranked even things like Monday Night Football and all sorts of things. And so most of these have been done on cable. Of course, that's where the one last night was done, CNN, as well as tied in with Salem Radio. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But the overnight rating is very high and very significant, so we'll talk about that. We also want to look at some endorsements that have come down, perhaps the most significant that took place within the last hour or so. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has indeed endorsed Donald Trump. That, I think, makes it even more likely that Donald Trump will be the nominee, because, after all, there were various people that contacted him after he dropped out, and he actually received phone calls from Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and John Kasich, each hoping to maybe get an endorsement. I think it would be doubtful that Marco Rubio would actually get that, given the fact that Chris Christie had said so many things about him. But we'll get into that in just a little bit. But the endorsement from Chris Christie to Donald Trump probably will be significant as well. This was a time in which you probably expected that there were going to be a few jabs thrown, and they were. And there have been some people that said, where was Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz months ago? Because there were all sorts of things being said, all sorts of punches landing on Donald Trump. Marco Rubio in lots of places was just sort of making fun of him. And a couple of times, I'll just give you a couple of the quotes, and we're going to have a chance to hear some of those. He says, I also think that if you're going to claim that you're the only one that lifted the issue of immigration into the campaign, that you've got to acknowledge, for example, that you're the only person on the stage that has ever been fined for hiring people to work on your projects illegally. Went on to say he hired workers from Poland and had to pay $1 million or so in a judgment. Then, of course, made some various remarks like, if he builds a wall the way he built Trump Towers, he'll be using illegal immigrant labor to do so. At one point when he repeated something, of course, you remember Marco Rubio saying, see, he's repeating himself. I see he repeating himself every night. And so, again, that's kind of one of those well, you said it to me, or actually Chris Christie said it to me, so I'm going to say it to you. Ted Cruz, on the other hand, said that Donald Trump says he's being audited. I would think that would underscore the need to release those tax returns. We'll hear more about that in just a minute. And, of course, the big argument that he made, which we're going to hear in just a minute from Ted Cruz, is that Donald Trump is promising that if he's elected, he will go and cut deals in Washington. He's right. He has supported and has given hundreds of thousands of dollars to Democrats. Anyone who really cared about illegal immigration wouldn't be hiring illegal immigrants. Anyone who really cared about illegal immigration wouldn't be funding Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, wouldn't be funding the Gang of Eight. And he's right. When you stand up to Washington, when you honor the promise you made to the men and women who elected you and say enough with the corruption, enough with the cronyism, that it's actually going to stand for the working men and women of America, Washington doesn't like it. And Donald, if you want to be liked in Washington, that's not a good attribute to be president. So those are just a few of the comments of perhaps the funniest line of the night. At one point, as they were going to Governor Kasich, from the background, you could hear retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson say, can somebody attack me? And of course, that was a joke saying, he wasn't getting a chance to say very much. And I think it's so illustrative of how individuals sometimes in the press have no sense of humor. I saw a clip where somebody was saying, this is a really bizarre thing for Ben Carson to say. And I thought, really? Do you not have a sense of humor for that? And then later when he talked about the fact that in terms of evaluating an individual, the scriptures talk about you will know a man by your fruit, and then uses the example of a fruit salad. I might have used a fruit basket, but whatever. We're all used to these kinds of metaphors where you stretch them a little bit. And everybody said, well, that's really bizarre. And it reminds me of Kathleen Parker a couple of, I guess it's been almost a few months now, but at one point she said, this is really bizarre. When Ted Cruz talks about the body of Christ rising up to help him, does he really think that the physical body of Jesus is going to rise up to help him with his campaign? And I'm thinking, you really don't understand that the word body of Christ means church? So anyway, we're not well served sometimes by those in the media, and I'll let you make some comments about even what the moderators said or didn't say, but let's, if we can, get to some of those. And the first very important issue is whether or not Donald Trump could actually beat Hillary Clinton. Here's what he said.
I'm beating him awfully badly in the polls.
But you're not beating Hillary.
So
you're not beating Hillary.
Well, then if I can't beat her, you're really going to get killed, aren't you? So let me ask you this, because you're really getting beaten badly. I know you're embarrassed. I know you're embarrassed, but keep fighting. Keep swinging, man. Swing for the fences. Let me just tell you. The Trump University case is a civil case, it's a civil case. It's a case where people want to try and it's a case that is nonsense. It's something I could have settled many times. I could settle it right now for very little money, but I don't want to do it out of principle. The people that took the course all signed, many, signed report cards saying it was fantastic, it was wonderful, it was beautiful. And believe me, I'll win that case. That's an easy case.
So again, one of the arguments being made by Ted Cruz is it's just going to be really difficult for Donald Trump to win because, first of all, he hasn't released his tax returns. We'll hear more about that in just a minute. He has this particular court case over his head, and of course, you heard a little bit of his response there. But more importantly, the point he was making is that here is an individual that on a number of different issues probably could not attack Hillary Clinton because they could simply come back and say, well, you supported me. You gave money to the Clinton Foundation. You gave money to me, Hillary Clinton. You didn't think it was so bad after all. And so one of the arguments that Ted Cruz is making was kind of the argument people made against Mitt Romney 4 years ago. And that is, Mitt Romney, you are the one that came up with Romney Care, which later became Obamacare. And so as a result, it will be very difficult for you to attack President Obama on Obamacare. The same kind of argument being made by Ted Cruz, and that is, Donald Trump, I just don't know that you're going to be very effective as a candidate. And the reason for that is that some of the things that would be very good attack lines against Hillary Clinton could easily boomerang and hit you as well. So that's just one of many points. And along the way, if you would like to join the conversation, perhaps you are a Ted Cruz supporter, a Marco Rubio supporter, a Ben Carson supporter, or even a Donald Trump supporter, we'd love to hear from you. 1-800-351-1212. We'll get back to a few more of the comments from the debate right after these messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Brian Thomas points out that the eastern two-thirds of the country have little federally owned land. By contrast, the federal government owns most of the land in the western states. Henry Lamb asks why the federal government owns 65% of the land west of Denver and only 2% of the land east of Denver. You know, these questions are beginning to be asked by various commentators, especially as citizens in western areas of America would like to develop property in their states. Originally, the government only needed land to fulfill its basic duties. Land was needed for federal buildings, roads, and parks. The rest of the land was available for private ownership. When the western regions of America became states, government philosophy was changing. Progressive reformers wanted to expand the size and scope of government, and they were also convinced that the government could do a better job of managing the land than individual private landowners. Brian Thompson writes about the contempt progressives had for what they called individualism and their desire for an expansive government based upon the living and evolving Constitution. Add to that an ecological mentality that argues that developing land is bad for the environment, and you have the situation we find today. Henry Lamb reminds us that the Constitution originally delegated certain powers to the federal government. This would include acquiring land for specific governmental needs, like building post offices, and the 10th Amendment declared that powers not granted to the federal government were reserved for the states and the people. Unfortunately, the states are no longer on an equal footing with the federal government. That is one reason why the federal government owns 98% of the land in Alaska and 86% of Nevada land. It also illustrates why the federal government is still working to confiscate the private property of ranchers and other private citizens. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Columbia Pictures, LD Entertainment, and Affirm Films present Risen, the Resurrection Through the Eyes of a Non-Believer. Risen, now playing. Rated PG-13.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Super Tuesday around the corner, and if you would like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Looking back to last night, the Republican presidential debate, the 10th of these debates. There have been a lot of them, and in some respects, they have been very helpful to begin to weed out some of the candidates, and at the same time, it gives us a chance over an extended period of time to really ferret out some of the comments. Now, I think some of the moderators last night, especially our Hispanic moderator, spent an entirely too much time talking about Hispanic issues and immigration and all the rest. And frankly, I think reinforced a stereotype. I would sometimes want to say, you know, if you're Hispanic, talk about something other than Hispanic issues. Talk about something other than immigration. I mean, this is an important issue, but you just sort of typecast yourself. And oftentimes she gave a speech and then ask, well, did you get it? Did you figure this out? And so, of course, we always have a little bit of frustration with the way the moderators handle it. And just about the time, sometimes there was a very good interaction between Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. Then oftentimes they would go to John Kasich or Ben Carson. But nevertheless, if you would like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Don't forget, we have our Pray, Organize, and Vote. We have, of course, the voter guide, which I think you're going to find very helpful. I've already had people comment about how much detail is in there. Matter of fact, if you go and click and click and click down to the source of a lot of the details, you'll say, whoa, there's a lot to begin to deal with. You can either get the summary or you can go to the detail page and find out a lot more. We also have 2 new videos, Why Your Vote Matters. That would be something good to send to somebody that might be wondering whether or not their vote really matters, whether their vote really counts, makes a difference. I can't imagine anybody right now would think that it does not. There is a remarkable, significant increase in voter turnout, both in the caucuses, which we've had in Iowa and Nevada, as well as in the primaries in New Hampshire and South Carolina. There's every bit of evidence that next week on Super Tuesday, there will be a very significant turnout. By contrast, not so much on the Democratic side. But before I take some phone calls, let me also put 1 or 2 more issues on the table. One of those I alluded to, and that was the question about Donald Trump. Are you going to release your tax returns? Some have, some have not. And as a result, especially Donald Trump, you had Mitt Romney speculating the other day that maybe there's a bombshell here. Here's how he responded.
I was the first one to file a financial disclosure form, almost 100 pages. You don't learn anything about somebody's wealth with a tax return. You learn it from statements. I filed, which shows that I'm worth over $10 billion. I built a great company with very little debt. People were shocked. The people in the back, the reporters, they were shocked when they went down. As far as my return, I want to file it, except for many years, I've been audited every year. 12 years or something like that. Every year they audit me. Nobody gets audited. I have friends that are very wealthy people. They never get audited. I get audited every year. I will absolutely give my return, but I'm being audited now for 2 or 3 years, so I can't do it until the audit is finished, obviously, and I think people would understand that.
I might just mention while he was talking about the audit, this was a real surprise. Ben Carson said he had never been audited as a doctor, neurophysiologist, and an individual that made a fair good amount of money from his speaking and from books and everything else. But the moment after he spoke at the National Prayer Breakfast, he was audited and kind of hounded, this way it sounded like. So that I thought was intriguing as well. Let's get to, before I take some phone calls, a long piece, and then I'm going to take some calls. This is sort of a back and forth between Marco Rubio and Donald Trump. It's sometimes difficult to kind of figure out who's saying what and when they're saying it. They're speaking over each other, but it just, again, has to do with the issue of Obamacare.
You may not be aware of this, Donald, because you don't follow this stuff very closely, but here's what happened. When they passed Obamacare, they put a bailout fund in Obamacare. All these lobbyists you keep talking about, they put a bailout fund in the law that would allow public money to be used, taxpayer money, to bail out companies when they lost money. And we led the effort and wiped out that bailout fund. The insurance companies are not in favor of me. They hate that. They're suing now to get that bailout money put back in. Here's what you didn't hear in that answer. And this is important, guys. This is an important thing. What is your plan? I understand the lines around the state, whatever that means. This is not a game where you draw maps
and you
around.
Don't know what it
What
means.
is your plan?
That's the problem.
What is your plan on health care? You don't have a
problem.
plan.
The biggest
Well,
problem he doesn't know.
The
biggest problem he's got is he
What's his
doesn't know.
plan?
You know, I watched him melt down 2 weeks ago with Chris Christie. I got to tell you, the biggest problem he's got is he really doesn't know about the lines. The biggest thing we've got, and the reason we have no competition, is because we have lines around the state, and you have
we already mentioned that as part of my plan. I know what that is. But what else is part of your plan? So your only thing is to get rid of the lines around the states. What else is part of your health care plan?
What the lines around the states mean.
That's your only
plan. And it was
plan.
almost done. No. You know
All
what
right,
that does?
I'll
That
give him
brings
time
in,
of mind. He can tell us his plan.
Excuse me. That
What's your
brings
plan?
in competition. When you get rid of the lines, it brings in competition. So instead of having one insurance company taking care of New York or Texas, you'll have many. They'll compete, and it'll be a beautiful thing.
Right. And so that's the only part of the plan? Just the lines, the interstate competition?
No, the nice part about the plan, you'll have many different plans. You'll have competition. You'll have so many different plans.
But now he's repeating himself.
No, I'm not repeating. No. I don't repeat myself.
You don't repeat yourself.
Here's the guy who repeats himself.
You repeat yourself every day.
I watched him, talking about repeating, I watched him repeat himself 5 times 4 weeks ago. And
I saw you repeat yourself 5 times 5 seconds ago.
I watched him melt down on the stage like I've never seen anybody. I thought he came out of the swimming pool.
I said, well,
let's talk about your plan.
Himself every night. It says 5 things. Everyone's dumb. He's going to make America great again. We're going to win, win, win. He's winning in the polls. And the lines around the state. Every night. Same thing.
Senator Rubio.
I tell the truth.
Senator Rubio, you will have time to respond if you would just let Mr. Trump respond to what you just posed to him.
He's going to give us his plan now, right?
If you could talk a little bit more about your plan. I know you talked about
the interstate. We're going to have many different plans because there's going to be competition.
Said it again.
There's going to be competition. There is going to be competition among all of the states and the insurance companies. They're going to have many, many different plans.
Is there anything else you would like to add to that?
No, there's nothing to add. What's to add?
So again, you got to get the idea. If you missed one of the comments there, Marco Rubio saying, I see him repeat every night. He said 5 things. Everybody's dumb. He's going to make America great. Win, win, win. He's winning the polls and the lines around the state every night. Same thing. So anyway, that was kind of some of the comments that you have. That's the longest clip I will play, but I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the back and forth. And in a sense of the attempt by Marco Rubio to just maybe ridicule a little bit of some of the constant repeating of certain kinds of lines by Donald Trump. So we'll see how it plays out, but I'd love to get some of your comments here. We'll head first to North Carolina. David, what would you like to add to the conversation today?
Yeah, I was just listening to that clip, but I actually hadn't heard that clip with the Donald or the Trump or whatever he wants to be called these days.
Uh-huh.
But my question and statement is, are we actually going to have a real conservative to carry the Republican Party? Because I say that because a lot of conservatives claim to be Christians. Donald Trump claims to be a Christian. But quite frankly, if I wasn't a Christian already and I was worldly, if I saw Donald Trump, I would say I want none of that. If that's what being a Christian is, he's no better than I am. But the ones that do say they're Christians, when they get into office, they've either been, if they are in fact Christians, like I think George Bush Jr. was a legitimate Christian. When they get in office, I feel like they get shouted down, they get called weird, strange, fanatical, and later on in their terms, if they indeed make it to a second term, you begin to see them begin to blur the lines, and I don't want to see that again. I believe that our country is already on a precipice.
I agree with
So
that.
what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, two points. First of all, the conservative argument. I think if you were to look at the way in which the voting records of those who actually have served in office, they would line up as conservative. One of the reasons why you have Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio going at each other is when you get right down to it, their voting records are pretty similar. So they have to find the few places where they can differentiate. Immigration is one, for example, and a few others. So I would have to say that, especially, let's just be honest, Ted Cruz has demonstrated since he's been elected to office that he really doesn't care what the people think sometimes. He doesn't care what the Washington establishment thinks. He's going to do what he believes is constitutional and follow that. And I think you would probably have most of the people on that stage that would hold to a generally conservative view. But you're right. I mean, when people look at Donald Trump, they say, well, how conservative is he? Then when you start asking, well, how Christian is he? Again, you have a little more belief that some individuals, as I've said before, I would without hesitation invite them to come to my Sunday school class or to my church and give their testimony. But there are only a few that I would invite to actually preach a sermon. Mike Huckabee fits into that category and a couple of others. So you sometimes have to say, okay, how are we using Christian in the broadest sense of the word? Or are we talking about people that believe in the authority and inerrancy of Scripture? That becomes a much narrower kind of group of individuals. So you're asking some good questions, and throughout the program today, we'll see if we can try to give some answers. But I'm up against a break, so let me take a break and take some more phone calls right after this.
Later this year, for the 58th time, America will choose a president. As a Christian, what are you doing to prepare for the election? Helping you cut through the major media spin is part of the mission of Point of View. We want to provide the best election resources, including a new website, Pray, Organize, Vote, encouraging people to intercede for the upcoming election, to help you get registered so you can exercise the stewardship of voting, to share things to help you get people involved and out to the polls. But to do all of that, we need you to vote right now with your support for Point of View. Show us that you're in this for the long haul as a citizen of heaven as well as the United States. Click Donate Now at the top of the page and give the most generous one-time gift you can at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. There is a lot of work to be done. Let's get to it together. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, all the lines are full, but as caller drops off, you can join us. And those of you that listen in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, you've had a chance to express your opinion and to vote. And now much of the listening audience here now on Point of View has an opportunity to do so, starting in March 1st, going all the way to June for our listeners there in California. I want to play a little bit more from the debate last night, but let's also hear from some of you as we go along. So let's head out to Georgia. Joan, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Good afternoon, Kerby. I just have a few comments to make about several of the candidates last night. I couldn't decide if I wanted to laugh or cry. But with I've been real sort of disappointed in Ben Carson, because in all this with Trump screaming liar and all this and everything that happened with Ben in Iowa, Ben Carson never stood up to Trump or Marco Rubio and said, listen, I'm a man. I can fight my own battles. So if he can't fight his battle with Trump, I was like, wait a minute, that just sort of disappointed me in him. But other than that, I loved him as a candidate. And then in the last couple of weeks, Marco turned into a mini Trump with his everything Ted Cruz said. He'd say liar, 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 and yet he said that his Gang of Eight bill was a poison bill, trying to steal Ted's line about his amendments being a poison pill. And, of course, Trump just embarrasses the hound out of me. I pray every day, Lord, please give us the president we can be proud of again. And now I'll have to tell you right off the bat, I am a Cruz supporter, but anyway, that's all I wanted to say is people look at them and look at them closely and see what they're saying and doing and how they'll change from one day to the next.
Well, again, you have 76 delegates that are going to be picked out of Georgia, and I think it's going to be real interesting to see what actually unfolds there. And so we'll be watching your election as well as many of the others on Tuesday. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. One of the issues was Donald Trump responding to the president of Mexico. And I'll just let you know that we won't use the word that was used, but nevertheless, he was arguing the president of Mexico, saying there's not a chance, and I'm cleaning it up a little bit, that he would pay for a wall. Donald Trump disagrees.
The former president of Mexico, Vicente Fox, he said today, and I'm quoting him, he said, I'm not going to pay for that, quote, wall. So if you don't get an actual check from the Mexican government for $8 or $10 or $12 billion, whatever it will cost, how are you going to make them pay for the wall?
I will, and the wall just got 10 feet taller, believe me. It's got 10 feet taller. I saw him make the statement. I saw him use the word that he used. I can only tell you, if I would have used even half of that word, it would have been national scandal. This guy used a filthy, disgusting word on television, and he should be ashamed of himself, and he should apologize, okay? Number one. Number two, we have a trade deficit with Mexico of $58 billion a year, and that doesn't include all the drugs that are pouring across and destroying our country. We're going to make them pay for that wall. Now, the wall is $10 billion to $12 billion if I do it. If these guys do it, it'll end up costing $200 billion.
So again, we left out the word, but that was what he was commenting about. And if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Let's head to Louisiana. You have a chance to vote a little bit later. And what do you want to say, Ricky?
Yes, it's just if you give me like 20 seconds for each. There's three candidates I want to comment on: Trump, Cruz, and Rubio. Cruz, for one thing, they can't find anything to criticize him, so they got to go after his wife, which is really a hit below the belt. After all, this is a missionary's daughter, grew up with morals and principles, and I believe these same people that try to go after Heidi, if they couldn't find nothing wrong with her, they would attack Cruz's children, 4 and 7. So anyhow, Cruz don't need no defense at all. Rubio, if you're for amnesty, you inadvertently for the Democratic Party, because it's a well-known fact against anybody knows that 77 to 80% of all immigrants that come to the United States vote democratically. That's votes for the Democratic Party. And if you vote for the Democratic Party, you vote for abortion, homosexual, and take away your Second Amendments, and to crucify the religious liberty. So if you for amnesty for Rubio, you for the Democratic Party. Trump, the thing with Trump, all y'all can prove to you that he's beyond a doubt Democratic, or at least holds Democratic principles, because in Nevada they had all kinds of voter fraud going on and on behalf of Trump. I've never heard of any voter fraud on Republican side. It's always been on the Democratic side. Always. This is the first time I've ever heard of massive fraud, fraudulent voting. I mean, these poll people actually worked for Trump and was doing the polls and passing out ballots left and right, and people voting 2 or 3 times. And I've never heard nothing on the mainstream news media, aside to say even the Christian media, even bring that up. And yet it was massive. So that proves that Donald Trump is a Democrat, because that's one of the basic planks of the Democratic Party.
That may not be too fair. I think a lot of it was incompetence, but okay. But I get your point. And Ricky, I appreciate your phone call, because you kind of gave us a quick overview of some of those individuals. And one of the big questions which was raised by Ted Cruz was whether or not Donald Trump could actually beat Hillary Clinton. We sort of dealt with that one. There was one more, and that was the moderator really raising the question as to whether or not Donald Trump could do well enough with the Hispanic vote, because the Hispanic vote is going to be very important in this election, as it has been in past elections. So here's how Donald Trump responded to that.
Mr. Trump, it is common knowledge that the Hispanic vote is very important in this race. You keep saying that Hispanics love you.
True.
And yes, you won the Hispanic vote in Nevada.
True.
But a brand new Telemundo poll says that 3 out of 4 Hispanics that vote nationwide have a negative opinion of you. They don't like you. Wouldn't that make you an unelectable candidate in a general election?
First of all, I don't believe anything Telemundo says.
You used to say that you love.
Number one. Number two. I currently employ thousands of Hispanics, and over the years I've employed tens of thousands of Hispanics. They're incredible people. They know, and the reason I won in Nevada, not only won the big one, but I also won subs. Like, as an example, I won with women. I won with every single category. I won with men. I won with high income, low income. I won with Hispanics, and I got 46%. Nobody else was close, because they know I'm going to bring jobs back from China, from Japan, from so many other places. They get it. They're incredible people. They're incredible workers. They get it. And I've won many of the polls with Hispanics. I didn't maybe win the Telemundo poll. But one thing I'm also going to do, I'm going to be bringing a lot of people in who are Democrats, who are independents. And you're seeing that with the polls. Because if you look at anywhere, look at any of the elections, every single election, it's been record-setting. And the good news is, for the Republican Party, the Democrats are getting very poor numbers in terms of bringing them in. We're getting record-setting numbers. I think I have something to do with that. We're getting record-setting numbers. And I won the 3 of them that I won with record-setting numbers. New people are coming into the Republican Party. We are building a new Republican Party. A lot of new people are coming in.
Couple comments there from Donald Trump, and let's go back to the phones. In Texas, KJRT. Matilda, thank you for calling today. You are on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to say that for Texans out there that are listening to this program, first of all, I'm calling from Amarillo, Texas, on King Jesus Reigns Today radio. And, Tuesday is our chance as Texans, having 155 delegates to help Cruz beat Donald Trump, because this is the most important election that we'll ever see in our lifetime. We're on the verge of losing our country. We're on the verge of losing our Constitution. And Ted Cruz has defended our Constitution for years, and he's proven that he doesn't care what anybody thinks about him. I love the way that he responded when Donald Trump told him that he doesn't have a single Republican friend, a senator friend up at the White House. I'm glad he doesn't, because he went out there, he made us a promise, and he's kept his promise. And I just love what he said about the state of Arizona, how the way that they changed their immigration laws have uplifted that state in such a manner that employees are making more money, that there's less welfare. And so, yes, we need to get America back. And this is the guy that can do it.
Well, good. I appreciate you calling in. Let me just mention, you said 155 delegates. That is the biggest prize on Tuesday. And just real quickly, since we're coming to a break, the way they break it down, we have 36 congressional districts in the state of Texas. And so you have 3 delegates for each one. That's 108. And then the remaining 47 come from who actually won by percentage. So this is one of those primaries where you require them not only to win the state, but also to win the various regions of the state. And there are a couple other of those primaries like that. So it's all the more emphasis on what we've posted on our website. Every vote counts, even in those congressional districts. We'll be right back.
At a recent ceremony at United Nations headquarters, 6 new postage stamps were unveiled. They were created by UN artist Sergio Baradot and are meant to elevate homosexuality, transsexuality, and gay parenting. The stamps are very colorful and done in a sort of geometric Art Deco style. One depicts a male couple embracing and kissing, another a female couple doing the same. One shows a same-sex couple carrying a little girl on their shoulders, another shows a person coming out of a closet. There's a stamp bearing a human butterfly figure representing someone's evolution as a transsexual, and one stamp is a picture of a bunch of people bearing different colors and designs. That one is an overall characterization of the UN Human Rights Office's Free and Equal campaign, under which the stamps were created and which aims to promote what the office calls fair treatment for the gay and lesbian community. UN stamps are released in dollar denominations, so you'll see these around. This is the first time the UN has ever released stamps with a gay theme, and the action did not take place without controversy. The Center for Family and Human Rights, or CFAM, reports that nearly half the UN member states oppose the stamps, even up to the eve of their unveiling. Stefano Gennarini writes in CFAM's Friday Facts that the opposition included 3 powerful UN blocs, totaling 86 countries, who sent letters to UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon. The Secretary-General failed to even acknowledge receipt of these coalition's letters. The Organization for Islamic Cooperation, which represents 57 countries, was one of the opposing groups. CFAM reports that the 54-member African group also denounced the release of the stamps, saying it reflects badly on the UN by, quote, associating it with issues that do not enjoy universal consensus. And the 24-member group of Friends of the Family, including Belarus, Egypt, and Qatar, said the action by the UN promotes a deeply controversial agenda. That agenda, they said, thwarts unity, dialogue, and mutual respect. There is no UN treaty promoting LGBT rights or protecting homosexual conduct. Not that there haven't been tremendous efforts over the years to get one. U.S. representatives, unfortunately, have been part of the effort to spread same-sex marriage to nations where prevailing religious belief opposes it, and to pressure countries that maintain laws that punish sodomy to drop those laws. Mr. Baradot, who serves as the United Nations Postal Administration Art Director, identifies as LGBT. In creating and designing these stamps, he said he was striving for the beautiful, elegant, and loving. The unveiling of the stamps was accompanied by a program of pop songs and love tunes sung by the New York City Gay Men's Chorus. All this is part of an attempt to promote rights to engage in sodomy, same-sex marriage, homosexual adoption, and transsexual behavior. Not exactly the United Nations historical mandate. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I mentioned those of you that listen online actually have a chance to hear the commentary by Penna Dexter, which we just played, and hers today was on the UN stamps. Mine was on government land, and so again, you can find some of those on the website, pointofview.net. Don't forget, we have the Pray, Organize, and Vote material, your one-stop election resource. You can find out where you are going to vote. You can actually locate your polling place. You can double-check and make sure that you are registered to vote. There is a voter's guide, and there are some videos we have actually loaded up to encourage you. I don't know that I need to encourage you, but so that you can encourage maybe others the importance of a vote. And I was just referring to that a minute ago. Matilda was in the state of Texas, and the state of Texas, it isn't just enough for you to win the state. You have to win the congressional district. So that means if you're up where she was in Amarillo, or you're down in Corpus Christi, or you're in Beaumont, those votes are going to matter. It's not just the people voting in Dallas and Houston and Austin and San Antonio, because a lot of those delegates are selected out of the congressional districts. And some of you live in states where that is the case as well. So it illustrates even more so how important one or two votes, maybe in just a particular precinct, might make the difference. So this is why I do encourage those of you that are going to be voting either March 1st or March 5th or March 8th or March 15th, just to mention the next couple of elections, that your vote's going to be very, very important. Let's go back to the phones. We've already talked about Georgia and the fact that they will be voting on Tuesday for 76 different delegates. And Thomas, what would you like to add to the conversation today?
Yes, I just want to say it's a shame with the presidential candidates. You know, they are vying for president, and they get on the television just lying on each other, lying to each other. And then for people like the governor, I think the governor of Ohio, too, that's running Senator 1, and Ben Carson, they're the only two the Bible said be slow to speak and swift to hear. And they're sitting there and they're being quiet. And they're not given the opportunity to speak as much as the other three candidates. And plus, the Republican Party, to me, is a joke. Because, like, if they stop doing the things and saying the things to each other that they are doing, and I'm not a Republican, but I believe in what the Bible said. They talk about gay people this, gay people that, and I'm not for gay because I'm not like that. But the Bible said, let the wheat and the tares grow up together, and God said he'll do the separate. But when man started trying to do things himself, that's when everything get out of whack. And that's what has happened to this country. Talk about taking the country back. We ain't got no country. It belongs to God. And what we need to do is come together as a people. You got two parties, a Democratic Party and a Republican Party, and they have both of us fighting against each other. That's the purpose of it.
Just out of curiosity, who would you vote for? You've seen a number of candidates. We got two on the Democratic side and 5 on the Republican side. Anybody that stands out to you that you might vote for?
Now, me, I'm a registered voter too. But me, I don't trust none of them.
Yeah. Well, again, you're welcome to not vote. But for those of you that would like to join the conversation, I'd love to know how you might vote as well. And we'll give you that opportunity. So let's go to Virginia now, because that's another very important state. 49 delegates, and they will be voting on Tuesday. Excuse me. I looked at the name, not the vote. Okay, North Carolina, Virginia, North Carolina. I'll get to the state of Virginia in just a minute. WLGP. Virginia, thank you for calling today.
Good afternoon, Kirby. How are you?
Very good. You won't vote till March 15th, but still a very important vote because 72 delegates come out of your state because of that election that will take place in about 2 weeks. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I believe, and you may say, or some may say, I'm fanatical, but I think we are seeing a last days supernatural phenomenon. When our government started legislating immorality, and we kicked the Bible out of schools and on, I think, as God did in the Old Testament, I think he is going to allow us to have a bad king. I think Trump is a bully. There's no way he can do the things he says he can do. He has no substance. All he can say is, I'm going to make America great again. I think Clinton and Sanders are socialists. I really believe that the one world order that's spoken about in Revelation is in place, and so many Americans, even Christians, aren't aware of the handwriting on the wall. I believe the U.S. Constitution is the only thing that has kept this one world order from coming about before now.
Very true. By the way, do you think we have had a bad king now, or do you think that's... Yeah, okay.
I was about to say that. I think Barack Obama maybe also was supernaturally put into office to start shredding the Constitution. And I truly believe if either Trump, Clinton, or Sanders are elected, then some form of shredding will continue. The only person I have any confidence in voting for is Ted Cruz.
Well, again, I'd love to bring a couple of people on the program sometime in the future. Jonathan Falwell, I was looking at how he's been trying to justify his support of Donald Trump. And, of course, we've also had a number of other individuals that have supported him as well. And even, of course, today you've got Chris Christie. But I do believe that some of the concerns you have are justifiable. And so we'll see how it plays out. But I appreciate that. And, of course, in Romans 1, it talks about God gave them over. And sometimes we see a situation that we've talked about, even in the Old Testament. We talked about this the other day when we had one of our guests in studio where the Israelites said, we want a king. And God says, you don't want a king. And they said, no, we want a king. And finally God says, okay, we'll give you a king. You won't like it. And that's exactly what you had. And now it's kind of like what's going to happen if indeed a country that has run up almost $20 trillion in debt, and that's just the on-record debt, not to mention all the other obligations. Is there any way to turn it around? And that's why more and more people are saying we can't find solutions in Congress. So some are talking about an Article 5 convention of the states. Others are saying we need to find the right leader, but we also have to find the right individuals to go along with that leader. And so, Virginia, I think you've got some really powerful comments to make. We do need to come to our break time. And so if those of you that are on the line will hold on, we'll give you that opportunity after we come back from the break to make your comments. We also have a number of other clips that I would like to play in the second hour from the Republican presidential debate last night. Some of the comments made by Donald Trump, some of the back and forth between Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, and even a clip from Ben Carson, who was mentioned earlier. So a couple of individuals that you have a chance to hear from. But again, this is an important time in which you really need to begin to consider how you're going to cast your vote. 12 different states on Super Tuesday will vote either in a caucus in a few cases or primaries in most. Then 4 days later, you have a number of others, 4 more states voting. Then a day or two after that, you have 4 more. And then, of course, I've been mentioning the fact that we have a whole string of various important primaries that take place on March 15th. So March 1st, March 5th, March 8th, actually a few in March 12th, but those are smaller ones like District of Columbia and Guam, and then March 15th. So a highly significant number, a very large percentage of our listeners will vote in the month of March, but we won't forget some of our listeners out there on the West Coast don't get a chance to vote in California till June. So we'll pay attention to all of those elections, but we also recognize that if you're going to change the trend, it's going to happen this coming Tuesday and the following few days after that. So if you would like to know more about all the candidates, not just the presidential candidates, but others, we encourage you to go to our Pray, Organize, and Vote. Click on that iVoterGuide.com material. You will find a lot more information about those candidates, and hopefully it will inform you so that you will be an informed voter. And I encourage you to encourage other people that you know to go out and vote as well. Let's take a break. We'll take some more of your comments, and we'll hear a few of the clips from last night's debate right after these messages.
From Columbia Pictures and LD Entertainment, in association with Affirm Films, the studio that brought you Heaven is for Real and War Room, comes Risen, the biblical story of the resurrection as told through the eyes of a non-believer.
The body has vanished. His tomb is empty.
Risen, starring Joseph Fiennes. Rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13. Now playing. More information is available at risen-movie.com.
Are you concerned about what's happening in our colleges, our marketplace, and the halls of government? Let me ask, have you invested in things that yield a good harvest? If you're already giving to Point of View each month, we thank you. You share in the reward for what we harvest. If you're not, now is the time. $30, $65, $100. The more you invest on a regular basis, the more we'll reap together. Give online at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. Click at the top on Become a Monthly Partner or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Talking about the Republican presidential debate took place last night, as well as looking forward to a vote that many of you will cast on this coming Tuesday, March 1st, or then some of you will actually cast it 4 days later on March 5th. Of course, we have some others on March 8th, March 15th. A very significant percentage of the listeners to Point of View in the next 2 weeks will cast their vote for not only the president, but please remember that many of you are in states where there is a U.S. Senate race. There are 34 United States Senate elections, and we, for example, have heard from North Carolina and certainly from Louisiana and Georgia, and those all have Senate races. But don't also forget the fact that you have in many of these states these legislative seats. 44 different states hold election for state legislatures. All the ones I just mentioned certainly do. In North Carolina, not only for the state legislature, but also for the governor. And so it's important to pay attention to that. And some of you in New Hampshire and Vermont and Indiana and Missouri and other places, you're also going to be voting for the governor. So pay attention to these down races, because those are really important as well. And this is why we encourage you to go to our Pray, Organize, and Vote resources, because you can find out a little bit more about the U.S. Senate race, congressional races, oftentimes state legislative races. And if we don't have them there, you can find some of the links to find out a little bit more elsewhere, because we really want to do what we can to educate you about these issues. But let's go back. A couple of you had some comments about the debate last night, and we take your phone calls, 1-800-351-1212. Let's head out to Texas, KAVX. And Beth, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, I wanted to point out something I heard last night.
Sure.
After they talked about the lines and Marco Rubio had asked Donald Trump what his health insurance plan would be, Ted Cruz, I believe, also had a question for him. And he said he didn't want anyone dying in the streets. And he said he believed in a mandate, an individual mandate to pay for health care, because Ted Cruz asked him how was he going to pay for the people to keep them from dying in the streets. And he said did he believe in a mandate? And he said, yes, he did.
Yep, and that's very similar to what we have talked about in terms of Romneycare and Obamacare. There are better solutions, and by the way, without a doubt, the most articulate presentation of what would be a very good health care alternative came from, no surprise, Dr. Ben Carson, retired neurosurgeon, and really outstanding. I think you also want to talk about the issue of Israel, because that came up, didn't it?
Yes, it did. He said that he would, you know how he's such a great deal maker, he would make a deal that would bring peace to Israel and the Palestinians, that he felt sure that he himself could bring about a deal for Israel.
Now, I'll give him some credit. He has shown a little humility in the past, saying this would be the toughest one. But let's hear that about this, because he was making a case that he's a negotiator. But at the same time, Marco Rubio was kind of making fun, saying, well, it's one thing to negotiate a real estate deal. It's another thing to negotiate a peace treaty. And this is what he said.
I'm a negotiator. I've done very well over the years through negotiation. It's very important that we do that. In all fairness, Marco is not a negotiator. I watched him melt down, and I'll tell you, it was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. He's not going down.
He thinks the Palestinian is a real estate deal.
And these people may even be tougher than Chris Christie, okay?
The Palestinians are not a real estate deal, Donald.
Okay, no. A deal,
They're not a real estate deal.
Is a deal. Let me tell you,
a deal is not a deal when you're dealing with terrorists. Have you ever negotiated with terrorists?
You are not a negotiator. You are not a negotiator. And with your thinking, you will never bring peace. You will never bring peace.
Donald might be able to build condos in the Palestinian areas, but he's not going to. This is not a real estate deal.
Senator. He will never be able to do it. I think I may be able to do it, although I will say this. Probably the toughest deal of any kind is that particular deal.
So, Beth, any comments about the stand that Donald Trump has about Israel?
Well, I don't know how you're going to negotiate with, terrorists
Hamas and Hezbollah. Yeah, I don't know either.
Wanting to wipe Israel off the map. The only way he's going to make a deal is to give up a lot of their territory, which, that's mentioned in the Bible about Israel in the last days giving up territory.
Yes. Well, Beth, we will come back to that issue because just an outstanding book that just came out on the miracle of Israel. And so we'll be talking about that book in the coming weeks. Go ahead.
One other thing. I remember when Miss Universe, I think, had to give up her crown because she said that she believed marriage was between a man and a woman. And if I'm not mistaken, he owned that or had something to do with it. And he was saying he thought she should give up her crown and not be able to say that she should give up her position because of her stand on marriage.
And again, maybe he's changed his mind on that. I don't know that he has. As I've said before, I don't have a problem with people flip-flopping as long as they flop back to the right position on that issue, so we'll see. But that has been a question that is going to and will continue to dog Donald Trump. All of a sudden you've had this conversion about issues like marriage and certainly abortion and others, and that's a reason why there's a question. And I think the fairest thing to say, Newt Gingrich has said it, I've said it, and so, that's not necessarily original with me, but a lot of people have said it. We don't know what kind of president Donald Trump is going to be like, because I don't think Donald Trump knows what kind of president he would be like. This is why whenever you bring in somebody that does not have executive experience, as our current president did not, you just don't know what it's going to be like. I knew very much what you were going to get from Ronald Reagan when he was elected because he was my governor when I lived in California. I knew very much what you were going to get with George W. Bush because he had been my governor when I lived in the state of Texas. And they pretty much ran their White House the way they pretty much ran the governor's office, although, of course, in both cases, it's a bigger government than just in the United States compared to California or Texas. We don't know what we are going to get when you have a United States senator, and you really don't know what you're going to get when you have a businessman. That's just the reality of it. And so we might look back and say that was a good decision. I fear that we're going to look back and say it was a really bad decision, but I want to hear your opinion because you get a chance to hear mine all the time. So we're going to take a break. We'll come back, hear a little bit more about what Donald Trump and Marco Rubio said about each other. We're going to hear a little bit more from Ben Carson, but most importantly, I want to hear from you. So I'll take some more phone calls first because you have the opportunity to express your opinion. And many of you, as I look down the screen here, are going to have a chance to vote in the month of March. Some of you, I can see one in California, get to wait a little longer, but all of you at one point or another either have voted or are going to have an opportunity to vote. And I'd love to know your comments about these very important issues. As I've said before, please take the time to go to the Pray, Organize, and Vote material. It is your one-stop election resource, and you can find some great resources there, and I would hope that you would pass those on to other individuals. If you have a friend that's not sure if he or she is registered to vote, you can actually check to make sure before you go to the polling place and find out that, well, you moved or you didn't renew or something like that. If you say, well, I don't know where my polling place is, we've had a place where you can check that out as well. We have a section here, Why Your Vote Matters, and most importantly, I'm pointing you to the piece on the Voter's Guide so that you can make some decisions about not only the president, but 34 United States Senate elections, 435 elections for the House of Representatives, 12 governor's races, and 44 races for state legislatures. All that coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Brian Thomas points out that the eastern two-thirds of the country have little federally owned land. By contrast, the federal government owns most of the land in the western states. Henry Lamb asks why the federal government owns 65% of the land west of Denver and only 2% of the land east of Denver. You know, these questions are beginning to be asked by various commentators, especially as citizens in western areas of America would like to develop property in their states. Originally, the government only needed land to fulfill its basic duties. Land was needed for federal buildings, roads, and parks. The rest of the land was available for private ownership. When the western regions of America became states, government philosophy was changing. Progressive reformers wanted to expand the size and scope of government, and they were also convinced that the government could do a better job of managing the land than individual private landowners. Brian Thompson writes about the contempt progressives had for what they called individualism and their desire for an expansive government based upon the living and evolving Constitution. Add to that an ecological mentality that argues that developing land is bad for the environment, and you have the situation we find today. Henry Lamb reminds us that the Constitution originally delegated certain powers to the federal government. This would include acquiring land for specific governmental needs, like building post offices, and the 10th Amendment declared that powers not granted to the federal government were reserved for the states and the people. Unfortunately, the states are no longer on an equal footing with the federal government. That is one reason why the federal government owns 98% of the land in Alaska and 86% of Nevada land. It also illustrates why the federal government is still working to confiscate the private property of ranchers and other private citizens. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Columbia Pictures, LD Entertainment, and Affirm Films present Risen, the Resurrection Through the Eyes of a Non-Believer. Risen, now playing, rated PG-13.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Up until now, we've had a full bank of phone calls, so if you've called and got a busy signal and you've wanted to get through, let me give you that opportunity right now. We've got a line or two open, and those will fill up quickly, but if you'd like to join us, we'd love to hear from you. 1-800-351-1212. Let's head out to California. They don't have a chance to vote till June 7th, but 172 delegates at stake when that vote does take place. So in California, KYCC, Chris, what would you like to add to the conversation?
Hey, happy Friday, Kerby.
Hey, glad you would call in. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, there's a few things that really concern me about Ted Cruz. Is one of them, I don't know if anybody's watched him every time the national anthem is sang. He tucks his hand into his jacket, which is a Freemason symbol.
Yeah, I don't think that is, but go on. You know, but I'll check it out. Okay, so
I'm asking people to do their own research.
Yeah,
every time he does
I've got my doubts about that. But what's your second one? So yeah, I'll watch that.
My second one is his wife was on the Council of
Foreign Relations,
and that is totally anti-constitutional. You know, so I mean, those are two things that really concern me, and you know, the Freemason hand signal is actually something that I encourage everybody to, you know, go to YouTube, go to Google.
I got my questions about that one. Yeah,
it's called the hidden hand.
Yeah,
and you know what? And that's really scary to me. The third thing is
Well, actually, I have 4 things. The third one is him and his wife's ties. I mentioned this before when I called in, and it kind of just got thrown under the bus, and nobody talked about it, was his wife and himself were involved with George W. Bush and the, creating the North American Union, which...
We have talked about that on the program, but go ahead. Yeah, and those are all kind of Heidi issues, pretty much. And that, I think, is a really valid question that I wish somebody would ask in the debates, because tied to Goldman Sachs, the North American Union, and, of course, and again, if you're a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, we've had people on this program that are as conservative as they can possibly be that are there and disagree with some of those ideas. So, just because you're on that doesn't necessarily mean that, but it would be nice to know, because we have had presidents in the past where the wife has been very influential. Rosalind Carter, certainly very influential. Nancy Reagan, and certainly Hillary Clinton. And so you do need to know, okay, what are, in a sense, you are running as a pair. And it's really important to ask those questions, and nobody's asked them yet, and I think they're good questions.
And then the fourth thing I have heard Trump talk about omitting the 501(c), which is the getting rid of the stuff with the church. A lot of churches are afraid to lose their tax exempt status. Not being able to allow to talk about certain things, but yet we don't know what's going on inside of a mosque. And the fact that I'm not saying I'm a Trump bandwagoner, or I think he's the greatest, but he is the only person that has actually, talked about getting rid of that. So, churches can actually speak from the pulpit what they want to. Yeah. Yet, Islam or mosques can say whatever they want, but the Christians, we got to watch what we say and be, politically correct. So. Sure. Those are some issues I just, like I said, I'm not an expert on anything, but those are some stuff that some friends and family members have told me to look at, and I encourage other people to do the same thing.
Well, appreciate you putting some on the table. Like I said before, and I've said this to other callers as well, I'd like to know a little bit more about where Heidi Cruz stands on a couple of issues, because, after all, she has those connections, and it's worthwhile, just as it's legitimate to ask about the connections that Donald Trump has had. And the difference is it is a wife, but I think we've learned only so well the influence of a wife, and probably the best example is the incredible influence that Hillary Clinton had in the Bill Clinton presidency. So you recognize that a really intelligent, well-connected wife makes policy, even if you're only thinking you're electing the husband. And so that's something to think about. And so appreciate you bringing that up. Let's get to Mike in South Carolina. Again, South Carolina, important vote taking place as well in the past. But at the same time, Mike, I think you want to speak to some of the people that will be voting next week. So what would you like to add to the conversation?
Yes, sir. I appreciate you encouraging everybody to get out and vote. Grab your friends, grab your church, everybody get out and vote.
And I assume you went and voted last week, did you?
Yes, sir. Sure did.
Good for you.
Ted Cruz, and me and the wife went to one of his rallies, and I really like Ted Cruz. I would love to see him on the Supreme Court. We watched the debates, and I see all this stuff about Rubio attacking Trump, and they're making the Washington establishment's making a big deal about it. But we were watching the debate last night, and when when Rubio was under pressure, he was sitting there stuttering like, that's all, folks. And for a leader to get under pressure and then start stuttering, it's like, wait a minute, maybe this guy is not a good leader. But you won't see commercials about that, about Rubio being under pressure and start stuttering.
He was trying to get a word in edgewise, which is a little difficult with the bombastic Donald Trump, but I understand that. And, frankly, some of the presidents we've had in the past haven't been real good verbally, but before the television era, that wasn't quite as important as it's become now. But that's a good point.
That's true. And like I said, I support Cruz. Would love to see him win, but I'd like to see him in the Supreme Court, too. But one thing that caught my attention last night was Donald Trump was the only one who brought up talking about the national debt and how he laid out a few plans about dealing with the national debt, and we're going to have to deal with it.
We certainly are. And again, to even say balancing the budget, as you heard from Donald Trump, is, well, we'll just, eliminate the Department of Education and EPA. And so they came back and said, okay, well, now you got maybe in round numbers $40 billion, but we have 10 times that much. What else? Well, waste, fraud, and abuse. Oh, boy, here we go again. Waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, I'll be the first to admit that if there's anybody on that stage who may be better at eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, it's what the Trump organization has developed over the years in making businesses more efficient. And if Donald Trump really was serious about that, he might do something that Ronald Reagan talked about but did not do. Because in 1980, Ronald Reagan ran, and part of the platform was to actually abolish the Department of Education. The sad reality was that as soon as it came time, what I thought Ronald Reagan should have done, and what I would think that if President Donald Trump comes into office should do, is just not appoint a Secretary of Education. That then forces everybody to say, well, you can't run without it. Well, I'm going to abolish it. It's one thing to say you're going to abolish it, but then in the case of Ronald Reagan, he put in, Bill Bennett, and everybody loved Bill Bennett, and the undersecretary was Gary Bauer, and everybody loved Gary Bauer. And so as a result, nobody wanted to get rid of the Department of Education because we've got our guys in there now instead of getting rid of it. So if you're really serious about wanting to get rid of some of these departments, and I think there are some that you could pick off real quickly: energy and education and commerce. And you make the long list. And of course, everybody's made their own list. Everybody from Rick Perry, who forgot one, to actually one time, even Ted Cruz forgot one of them. But the bottom line is make the list and then don't appoint the secretaries and be really serious about it. I think that would be the way to actually begin to reduce the size and scope of government. But the biggest one, and Mike, you're right on target, has to do with the issue of entitlements. And there are just a lot of things that need to be said and done there. We got a full bank of phone calls. I'll give you a chance after the break to make your comments. We also still have a few clips that I'd like to play, just so you could hear a little bit more about what happened last night, in case you happened to miss it. And so we'll hear a little bit of the interchange between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, a little bit from Ben Carson. But most importantly, I want to hear from you, because most of you are in states that either, in the case of South Carolina, have voted, or in states, as we're looking at here, that will be voting in the future and certainly have some thoughts about this, and certainly have had some experience now with some of those commercials. As I've said before, my heart goes out to those of you in Iowa and New Hampshire that had to be pummeled for month upon month upon month by those commercials. Many of you now in some of the states where we're broadcasting today are just now getting a feel over about a 2-week period of what these people endured over about a 4-month period. And you can see why after a while people were just sick of those political commercials in places like Iowa and New Hampshire, and even a little bit in South Carolina and Nevada. But now you're getting a chance to see what those commercials are like. And it doesn't necessarily make for great viewing. So let's take a break. We'll come back and give some more of you a chance to join the conversation. We'll hear a little bit more from the Republican presidential debate. So stay tuned and stay on the line, and we'll get to those calls right after this.
A farmer will tell you that if you don't prepare the ground, if you never plant good seeds, don't expect a harvest. Weeds maybe, edible crop no. Achieving a positive result takes work and planning. If you're concerned about what's happening in our colleges, our marketplace, in the halls of government, let me ask, have you invested in pulling weeds and planting seeds? That's what the Truth Team at Point of View does. For decades, God has used this team to attack noxious mental weeds and to plant seeds of truth that have grown into changed lives. If you're already giving to this effort each month, we thank you. You share in the reward for what we harvest. If you're not, now is the time. $30, $65, $100. The more you invest on a regular basis, the more we'll reap together. Give online at pointofview.net or using the Point of View radio app, pointofview.net. Click at the top on Become a Monthly Partner or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Talking a little bit about the Republican presidential debate last night. I'll play a clip in just a minute. But also, many of you are going to have a chance to vote either this next Tuesday or following. And, of course, my next caller is going to be in Texas that will be voting on March 1st. And I see some callers from Maine, which will vote on March 5th. So a lot of these particular areas where we're broadcasting right now, you're going to have a chance to actually cast a vote. Up until now, it's been kind of theoretical. But let's, if we can, hear from Joanne in Texas, listening on KCTA. Joanne, thank you for calling today.
Well, thank you for letting me talk. I just had a quick comment I wanted to make because there has been a lot of negativity on Donald Trump here lately, which, you know, I'm not a Donald Trump fan, but I just want to encourage people and encourage you there to make sure that people don't stay home if Donald Trump is the nominee and do what they did.
Well said. Yes.
Yes. We don't want the same thing to happen that happened 4 years ago. Well, I'll just stay home. I'm not going to vote for that man. And then we get Hillary in there.
Well, let me just speak to that for a minute. I mean, it may be premature, but it's good to mention it right now. We have a few people, and I'll use an example. Eric Erickson, you know, he wanted us to help promote his book, and I was ready to do so. And then he came out and said, under no circumstances would I vote for Donald Trump, either in the primary or the general election. I go, whoa, wait a minute. Where did that come from? I mean, if you not know Eric Erickson, he had Red State, and of course he's sometimes sits in for Rush Limbaugh. We'll see whether Rush keeps him on the air, because we know what happened when some people said, well, I just don't really like Mitt Romney, or I think he's maybe too rich, or, you know, I don't agree with his Mormon theology, whatever that might be, and they stayed home and then made the argument that that was the right thing to do. When then we saw what has happened in the second term of Barack Obama. If, again, you stay home, and, you know, it's I'll be the first to admit, it's going to be really difficult for me to even think about voting for Donald Trump for all sorts of reasons that have already been given by many of you listening in and calling in. But at the same time, looking at the consequences will be dramatic, especially in light of just what Mike said a minute ago. He said it in passing. Let's pick this up. There have been some people that have suggested that maybe if Ted Cruz is not the nominee, that Ted Cruz might be a very good nominee, not for president, but for the Supreme Court. Now, I don't know if Ted Cruz wants to be on the Supreme Court. I don't know if you could come up with 60 votes in the Senate to pass filibuster, to break out filibuster and have cloture and get Ted Cruz on the Supreme Court. But that is only going to happen possibly if another candidate like Marco Rubio or Donald Trump wins the nomination. It is not going to happen for sure if Hillary Clinton wins the nomination, which I'm sure she will. I just don't think Bernie Sanders has a chance. So that's reason enough to pay attention to who is on the ballot come November. So, Joanne, I appreciate you reminding us of that. It's something we'll probably be talking about quite a bit if indeed Donald Trump indeed wins the nomination. There'll be some people say, well, I just can't in good conscience vote for Donald Trump. But not voting for him pretty much assures that Hillary Clinton would be your next president. And I can guarantee you that the kind of nominees that Hillary Clinton would put on the court would be just the kind of nominees that her husband put on the court, and the kind of nominees that Barack Obama has put on the court. And that would be the end of any kind of fair evaluation of the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and all sorts of other issues. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thanks for calling in. Let's, if we can, just get back to Donald Trump, since we were talking about him. There was a point at which he kind of decided to unleash on all of those people that had been bringing a few jabs to him. This is what he had to say.
You are all talk and no action. What I've seen up here, I mean, first of all, this guy's a joke artist and this guy's a liar. You have a combination. This guy always goes. You have a combination of factors. He can't do it for the obvious reason, and he can't do it because he doesn't know how to tell the truth.
What we're seeing with Donald is actually the pattern of Washington, the pattern of Washington deal makers, which is they make promises, they break their words, and then when anyone calls them on it, they call you a liar. And so that's Donald's pattern over and over again. And every time anyone points at Donald's actual record, what he said on national television, Donald yells liar. Let me tell you something. Falsely accusing someone of lying is itself a lie, and it's something Donald does daily.
Go ahead, Mr. Trump.
I watched the lobbyists. I watched what this man did to Dr. Ben Carson, who I respect, in Iowa, where he said that Ben Carson is out of the race. He has left Iowa. and he's out of the race. And I thought it was disgraceful. And got a lot of votes because of that. A lot of votes took him away from Ben Carson. I watched that. Probably took him away from me, too. But I watched it. I also watched where he did a form that looked like it came right out of a government agency. And it said on top, voter violation. And then it graded you, and it scared the hell out of people. And it said the only way you clear up the violation, essentially, is to go and vote for Ted Cruz. I watched that fraudulent document, and I said it's the worst thing I've ever seen in politics. To me, that was even worse than what he did to Ben.
Senator Cruz.
I know
Donald,
politicians, believe it or not, better than you do, and it's not good.
So again, just a little bit of back and forth. Donald Trump talking about Ted Cruz being a liar, and then talking about some of the, quote, dirty tricks of the campaign, talking about Rubio being a choke artist. So it got pretty rough, and it probably will be one more time. I suspect that these debates will wind down pretty quickly, though, if we'll see how that plays out. Let's go back to Georgia in this case on the Good News Network. Carla, what would you like to add to the conversation?
I voted already. I voted for Ben Carson last week, last Friday, and I'm glad I did. He's the only gentleman there, as far as I'm concerned, and he knows business, and he's got that good medical program, that insurance program. I think it will work. And I'm from a medical family, so I know what he's talking about.
I thought he did a very good job of presenting that, and they tried to cut him off, and he said, look, I don't get a chance to speak very much. Let me finish. And I thought, yes, he's the smartest person up there in terms of health care policy, and certainly did himself well last night when he did have a chance to speak to a few of those issues.
Yes. And the other day I was thinking, they were talking about Trump, and I was thinking about what would it be if they were both they were in the White, he and his wife were in the White House. I mean, I can't imagine it, you know.
Yeah, well, we might have to. Let me real quickly, because we're coming to a break, I wanted to have you hear from Ben Carson, and there were some very good things he said, and I might even try to see if we can pull together a transcript or something from his website, because he really did have some very good common sense statements about healthcare and about healthcare policy, but he also talked about the fact that after the National Prayer Breakfast, he was audited.
Hugh, you said you're going to be fair to everybody. You didn't ask me about taxes. I had something to say about that. Now,
go ahead. This is your moment.
Okay. We have a system of taxation in this country that is horribly wrong. You know, I never had an audit until I spoke at the National Prayer Breakfast. And then all of a sudden, they came in, they said, we just want to look at your real estate dealings. And then they didn't find anything, so they said, let's look at the whole year. And they didn't find anything, so they said, let's look at the next year and the next year. And they didn't find anything, and they won't find anything, because I'm a very honest person. But the fact of the matter is the IRS is not honest, and we need to get rid of them.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, some of you want to address that issue, because you know that one of the things that certainly Ted Cruz has talked about, and others as well, but certainly Ted Cruz has made this front and center, is I want you just to abolish the IRS. And indeed, if you have a flat tax, which, by the way, Ben Carson has one of the best that have been put forward, as well as Ted Cruz, and then when he was in there, Rand Paul, those were the three that the Wall Street Journal liked the best. Those were ones that really probably would get rid of the IRS and get rid of some of this kind of scrutiny. And so you've heard Donald Trump not only talk about being audited, but here Ben Carson being audited. And you know why this is the case. It is because anytime you're seen as, quote, an enemy of the administration, they sick people on you. And we have, over the years, have talked with Oliver North about this. We've talked about this with Joseph Farah. And, of course, now you hear a story about this with Ben Carson. So we'll come back and talk about this issue. I see some of you want to address that issue of what Ted Cruz would like to do in terms of abolishing the IRS. And we'll take a few more phone calls. We'll do our best to give as many of you a chance to comment. And if we don't have enough time today, we'll certainly have more time next week. So even though we have Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell on next week, and we have a variety of other great guests, I've left a fair amount of time to not only talk about what was happening Tuesday, but also the next day on Wednesday, because these elections are important. We'll come back with more right after this.
At a recent ceremony at United Nations headquarters, 6 new postage stamps were unveiled. They were created by UN artist Sergio Baradot and are meant to elevate homosexuality, transsexuality, and gay parenting. The stamps are very colorful and done in a sort of geometric Art Deco style. One depicts a male couple embracing and kissing, another a female couple doing the same. One shows a same-sex couple carrying a little girl on their shoulders, another shows a person coming out of a closet. There's a stamp bearing a human butterfly figure representing someone's evolution as a transsexual, and one stamp is a picture of a bunch of people bearing different colors and designs. That one is an overall characterization of the UN Human Rights Office's Free and Equal campaign, under which the stamps were created and which aims to promote what the office calls fair treatment for the gay and lesbian community. UN stamps are released in dollar denominations, so you'll see these around. This is the first time the UN has ever released stamps with a gay theme, and the action did not take place without controversy. The Center for Family and Human Rights, or CFAM, reports that nearly half the UN member states oppose the stamps, even up to the eve of their unveiling. Stefano Gennarini writes in CFAM's Friday Facts that the opposition included 3 powerful UN blocs, totaling 86 countries, who sent letters to UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon. The Secretary-General failed to even acknowledge receipt of these coalition's letters. The Organization for Islamic Cooperation, which represents 57 countries, was one of the opposing groups. CFAM reports that the 54-member African group also denounced the release of the stamps, saying it reflects badly on the UN by, quote, associating it with issues that do not enjoy universal consensus. And the 24-member group of Friends of the Family, including Belarus, Egypt, and Qatar, said the action by the UN promotes a deeply controversial agenda. That agenda, they said, thwarts unity, dialogue, and mutual respect. There is no UN treaty promoting LGBT rights or protecting homosexual conduct. Not that there haven't been tremendous efforts over the years to get one. U.S. representatives, unfortunately, have been part of the effort to spread same-sex marriage to nations where prevailing religious belief opposes it, and to pressure countries that maintain laws that punish sodomy to drop those laws. Mr. Baradot, who serves as the United Nations Postal Administration Art Director, identifies as LGBT. In creating and designing these stamps, he said he was striving for the beautiful, elegant, and loving. The unveiling of the stamps was accompanied by a program of pop songs and love tunes sung by the New York City Gay Men's Chorus. All this is part of an attempt to promote rights to engage in sodomy, same-sex marriage, homosexual adoption, and transsexual behavior. Not exactly the United Nations historical mandate. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
After a few more minutes, let me just give you a program note for next week, and that is we're going to have an open line first hour on Monday, simply because there will be a lot to cover over the weekend and some of the fallout from the debate, and also looking ahead to the election. But I'll have Kelly Wright in studio with us, and if you're not familiar with him, African-American Fox News contributor, but this is the part I really love, because every once in a while people say, well, we should have an exemption for rape and incest. Well, his mother was raped, but she decided not to have an abortion and have him. And so it's always fun to have somebody in studio, as I have over the years, individuals. I always want to say to those people that think, well, rape's a good justification for that. And I said, well, then say that to the person sitting across from me right now who was conceived as a result of rape, and tell them that they should have died in the womb. And that's certainly a deal breaker. We'll have Sean McDowell and Josh McDowell on later in the week, because we are going to be talking about their new book. And then we'll, of course, be covering the various primaries on Tuesday, and we'll be covering that again on Wednesday. Then we'll have a little bit of a break Thursday, because Barbara Rainey will be with us, and Dave Kinnaman of Barna will be with us. But then, of course, we have our weekend edition. So we'll certainly try to do as much as we can to cover the campaign. But at the same time, there are a lot of other issues and books and resources I think would be great for you to hear about as well, and that's what we do here on Point of View. Let's get into this issue of what that might mean if indeed you have an individual who is successful in abolishing the IRS. So we'll go to South Carolina, WLPG, and Hugh, I think you wanted to address that issue, so you have the floor.
Thanks, Kerby. Just following up on your closing comments on the last segment. If I understood the caller from California, previous couple segments, I guess, ago, saying that Trump, if I understood correctly, was the only candidate who was addressing the issue of churches and religious organizations being either attacked or losing their tax-exempt status. And you made the point, which I will just again repeat, that if the IRS indeed is replaced by a flat tax or some other fairer tax system, then the IRS is no longer there to harass and to take away tax-exempt status from anyone.
Sure.
And so the caller from California was pointing out several concerns about Cruz's positions or thoughts about him, but he failed to recognize or acknowledge at least that he does indeed support doing away with IRS. I know he as a president or anyone as president can't do everything they want to do. They've got to cooperate with Congress, and so they need to be careful what they promise. But yeah, I think that caller was at least had an oversight at the least to fail to point out that that's Cruz's ambition to do what he was saying.
You know, and when we talk about religious liberty, of course, when Kelly Shackelford is usually with us on Friday, and he's out this week, he points out that of all the candidates, Ted Cruz has certainly stood strong on religious liberty because in many cases, the cases that Liberty Institute, now called First Liberty, have fought, sometimes they've used Ted Cruz or a variety of other individuals to argue the cases before the Supreme Court. Paul Clement and Ted Cruz probably been more helpful to Kelly than anybody else. But going down the list, Marco Rubio, John Kasich, pretty much Ben Carson. My concern with John Kasich, though, the other day he was asked about this, and he said, you know, when we're talking about baking goods or when we're talking about weddings, you know, they just need to get over it. And so I don't feel like he's as strong on that issue. Donald Trump says he's strong on the religious liberty issue, but we don't have a track record. So if you're looking for a track record, I still think Ted Cruz is the one that has demonstrated by not only his words, but his actions, by actually arguing some of these religious liberty cases before the Supreme Court since he was Solicitor General of the state of Texas. He's really demonstrated that he understands this issue and understands the abuse of the IRS. And, of course, Ben Carson and Donald Trump have been experiencing it, apparently. So I appreciate you bringing all that up.
Thank you.
Let's give a few more of you a chance to join the conversation. Let's head to Maine. Maine on March 5th will have a chance to vote, and there are 23 delegates at stake there. So, Mike, WSEW, what would you like to add to the conversation?
Hey, Kerby, thanks for taking the call. I'm definitely going to try and get out there and vote. I love the political process. Wanted to ask you if you felt there was any chance at all that Ben Carson could make a comeback from behind. He's such a breath of fresh air. He's the only one that won't attack the others. I think he's just great, and I would like to see him do something, if at all possible. I would like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I wish we could. I really do like Ben Carson. On a few theological issues, he and I disagree, but on everything else, I mean, just a real man of integrity. I really like him, just a very likable individual, very smart. I felt that really there are the three candidates, Trump, Cruz, and Rubio, and then you have the two others. And a lot of people say, why are they staying in the race? Well, I think we all know why John Kasich is staying in the race. He's staying in the race because he wants to be vice president. And frankly, I think he solidified that last night. He had some really good foreign policy answers on a variety of different issues, whether it was North Korea or what was happening in the Middle East. I think Donald Trump might say, you know, if I need somebody that's been in government, he was the last architect of a balanced budget, because you remember John Kasich was a member of Congress at the time when, because of Newt Gingrich and John Kasich and Bill Clinton and others, they actually balanced the budget. Boy, that's back in the memory bank of nothing else. And so anyway, I think he's in there for that. I think Ben Carson may be there just because he feels like he needs to continue on. But also, I think in some respects, some people are looking at him and saying, if I were Donald Trump or I was even Ted Cruz and I was thinking I might be the next president, I'd say, answer by Ben Carson on health care. This guy needs to be our next Secretary of Health and Human Services. I mean, this guy knows this. He understands this. He lived it his whole life, and he is very articulated about it, and he would be a real good asset. So you may, on that stage, be looking at a couple of other people that won't be president, but if one of the others on the stage becomes president, will be in the cabinet, and I think that's probably where Ben Carson ends up. Surgeon General, Department of Health and Human Services, something like that.
Awesome. Thanks, Kerby.
Wish she had a better chance, but it's hard to just go from never being in political office to being the president. It's not an entry-level position, although if Donald Trump is elected, we'll see how that plays itself out. Let's see if we can get one or two more phone calls here. We'll go to Missouri. Missouri, a very important state coming up as well, because they are going to also be voting March 15th. 52 delegates at stake. And listening on the internet, Scott, you have the floor.
Thanks, Kerby. I've talked to you a number of times in the past. I have one comment, and then I have sort of a rhetorical comment that you might want to address. But the first comment is the behavior of Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz last night I thought was rather childish, and it tended to look more like a high school competition than a competition for president. I thought Ben Carson and John Kasich and Donald Trump, all three, were pretty respectable in that debate. But
I'd agree with the first two. I'm not sure about Trump, but okay, yeah. But certainly, the adults in the room have always been John Kasich and Ben Carson, and your point's well taken. I think a lot of people got turned off last night, especially when Marco Rubio just started to be kind of making fun and being really flippant towards Donald Trump. I mean, they're looking for something for breakout, but I just don't think that resonates with the American people, and I think you're illustrating what I think millions of people think when they watch some of that.
Yeah, and then on a broader thought, I have some anecdotal evidence, nothing that I can prove, but it seems like there might be a philosophical shift in the baby boom generation, and let me explain why I say that. And it sort of goes back to that book that we've talked about a number of times, The Fourth Turning. As you know, as people get older, as that particular generation gets older, that prophet generation, they sort of change their course in history. But Donald Trump, you know, he's pretty much made his money the way he wanted to, and then all of a sudden he's trying to promote his Christianity.
I'm afraid I'm going to run out of time before you've got a really good point, but unfortunately I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get to it. So, Scott, could you call back? Maybe we can do it on Monday, because I'd love to hear a little bit more about The Fourth Turning, but I just looked at my clock, and the time waits for no one. So how about you call back, and we'll talk a little bit more about maybe the shift in the baby boom generation. Of course, I think also with the baby busters and the millennials and all the rest, but we're simply out of time, so we'll have to call it a day, and I hope you'll have a great weekend. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Shamila for the help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here on Monday.
Later this year, for the 58th time, America will choose a president. As a Christian, what are you doing to prepare for the election? Helping you cut through the major media spin is part of the mission of Point of View. We want to provide the best election resources, including a new website, Pray, Organize, Vote, encouraging people to intercede for the upcoming election, to help you get registered so you can exercise the stewardship of voting, to share things to help you get people involved and out to the polls. But to do all of that, we need you to vote right now with your support for Point of View. Show us that you're in this for the long haul as a citizen of heaven as well as the United States. Click Donate Now at the top of the page and give the most generous one-time gift you can at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. There is a lot of work to be done. Let's get to it together. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.